My name is Tori Mandel, and I wanted to focus my presentation on Hieronymus Bosch and his works depicting religious narratives. I specifically wanted to focus on his themes of disease and illness in the triptych Temptation of St. Anthony. During and throughout the Renaissance and Middle Ages, there were many conditions that were thought to be common even if they weren't fully understood. Some of these illnesses were plague, leprosy, ergotism, smallpox, and typhoid. Many of these diseases had characteristics similar to others. For example, typhoid had similarities to the plague and fever and in skin rashes. But this week I wanted to focus more on ergotism. So I want to do a quick overview of Hieronymus Bosch. He was believed to be born in 1450 and he definitely died in 1516. His life and biography are not well known. A lot of his paintings have been destroyed or they've remained unfound, and we can't get a lot of information about his life aside from journals at the time. He was part of the Northern Renaissance. He was a Dutch Netherlandish painter, and he liked to paint religious concepts that were fantastical. A lot of his work was surrealist and showed representations of medieval symbols, but moved away from a lot of common external influences of the time, such as portraits and landscapes, and focused more on the fears and beliefs of people during the time. So instead of the external, it focused on what was inside their heads. Some of these themes were illness, hell, and the fight between good and evil. He had a lot of really macabre versions of hell and created his own monsters. A lot of them were of folklore, and he kind of put his own spin on them. Most of his work was done on oak wood and oil. So this is the Temptation of St. Anthony. It was estimated to have been created around 1501. It's just one of many versions of the story of St. Anthony's trials against temptation and sin. In most versions by other artists, including Bosch, he overcomes temptation despite being tortured by demons and heinous creatures or temptations of the flesh. In this piece specifically, we see three stages of St. Anthony's journey. His flight and failure, you can see him on the back of a demon being tortured in the left-hand panel. His temptations, he's surrounded by beautiful women, by demons in the middle panel, and his overcoming temptations. He is triumphant in the final panel. While his work is described as surrealist, I think he did a pretty good job of capturing some really scary, horrible things that are huge fears for people in the Middle Ages. And this story is really an epic about his struggles against sin and his victory over them. I like the Temptation of St. Anthony specifically because Bosch has such a creative means to show us our deepest fears in the form of monsters and temptresses. He seems to focus more on what we would imagine hell to be and makes a point to show us that hell is real and we could definitely go there. In this piece, I focused my attention on the themes of ergotism. It's a disease caused by ingesting ergot. It's a type of rye grain fungus. The disease leads to many different symptoms, but they fall into two categories. So the first category is convulsive symptoms, and the second is gangrenous symptoms. In the convulsive symptoms, there are things such as seizures, spasm, diarrhea, mania, psychosis, and hallucination. And we have gangrenous symptoms such as edema, loss of peripheral sensation, gangrene, and often loss of a body part due to infection. Before and after the 1500s, it was unknown what caused ergotism, so many people kind of attributed the disease to other illnesses such as the Black Death. Ergotism is believed to have been a semi-common theme in many Renaissance pieces, especially in the revisions of the Temptation of St. Anthony. And ergotism was also deemed St. Anthony's fire because certain followers of the saint worked to treat ergotism and sometimes used relics of the saint to do so. Ergotism also left people feeling as though they were on fire and left visual hallucinations of fire. It is now known that when ergot is baked into bread, lysergic acid is formed, which is a precursor to LSD. A fun or not so fun fact here is that it is debated whether the Salem witch trials may have been largely due to an outbreak of rye ergot during that period of time. It is no surprise that this illness might influence work during the Middle Ages. In Bosch's version of the Temptation of St. Anthony, we can see a few symbols of ergotism here and medical practices of the time. First, we see the mandrake. It's another monster in Bosch's painting, which shows a half-human, half-vegetable hybrid. It appears to be the mandrake root, and it was used in the Middle Ages to relieve pains caused by fever from many diseases, including ergotism. There's also an egg-shaped building in the painting which resembles an apothecary, and an apothecary was used to reduce herbs into medicine. This is possibly a neutral creature, or not good or bad, symbolizing illness and medicine. Second, we see several amputated body parts, as you can see here in the upper left-hand side. It's a foot sitting on a towel, and amputations were really common due to ergotism and gangrene. It may also be a symbolism of afterlife, because it was believed that people were reunited with their lost flesh after death. Throughout the entire triptych, we can see many different amputated body parts, but we also see different creatures without their full limbs or missing body parts. Finally, we see lots of fire and brimstone throughout the triptych. And while it is definitely a representation of hell and Bosch's version of hell and what would have been imagined to be hell at the time, ergotism was commonly believed to be the first step before hell. This is largely in part due to the burning sensations that people had and the hallucinations of fire. While ergotism isn't a central theme in most paintings, and certainly not this painting, there are many icons and symbolism throughout Bosch's piece. Many paintings demonstrating disease during the Middle Ages were often of the Black Death, so I kind of wonder whether it did not influence painting with themes of disease and illness and the interpretation of hell and death in art. And also, I believe that ergotism, again, was mistaken for many other diseases. It was common, but it wasn't fully understood at the time and was just known as St. Anthony's fire. So what we believe to be hell must have been influenced in some part by paintings of the time, by art of the time, and I think that disease definitely played a part in that.